Social 30-1 here doing source number one. Our theme for the week is going to be dictatorships one more time. In this case, we're going to look at scapegoating and mass executions. So I'll give you a few seconds to read it over, then we'll pick it apart. Okay, let's get into it. So we've got a quote here from a survivor of a North Korean prison camp. His name is Shin. Uh, Talks about being 9 years old and suffering abuse at the hands of classmates, of the prison guards, and a teacher. Like how he's put the word teacher in quotation marks. Probably not really a teacher like we would think of a teacher today, but more of someone who is advocating government propaganda, trying to indoctrinate a prison population, and so on. Not teachers like we would think of it. And the kids are labeled as reactionaries. And so if you can think back to actually one of the first few days of class in 30-1, we examined the political spectrum. And on one end of the spectrum was the reactionary, someone who is elitist and probably a fascist and wants to bring back a time when there was an egalitarianism, equal opportunity, and things like that. Other side of the spectrum would have been the radical, someone who was fighting for change. And so they have branded these children reactionaries. In other words, these are kids who would want to undo the revolution, who would want to bring back a time in which people weren't treated equal, in which there was elitism and you were born into a certain class of society, kind of like the French Revolution before the French Revolution, at least the time before the French Revolution, feudalism. So it's just highly ironic that this teacher is calling these kids reactionaries. Because if anything, the prison camp itself is the reactionary institute. They don't want change. They want to keep things the same. The prison guards would be the reactionaries if anyone was reactionary. But that's not the most important part of the source. It's further down. It's at this point we realize this is in fact a North Korean prison camp, Gulag as they're called, and it talks about the North Korean caste system. A caste system is a system in which you're born into a certain class in society and you can't get out of it. The further down the caste system you are, the lower your caste, the less rights and freedoms you have. In fact, if you're in the lowest caste system, you probably don't even have rights and freedoms. You wouldn't even be considered a citizen. The name for the system in North Korea is Songbun. That's something you should make a note of. A third of the population of North Korea belongs to this bottom caste, according to the Songbun. And what puts them in the bottom caste is they're hostile or they're disloyal to North Korea and the movement of North Korea. They're not loyal to the dictator. Now, whether or not they're loyal or disloyal probably is beside the point. They've been branded as disloyal. They've been scapegoated as being disloyal, which is a common tool that we've learned among dictators. So they're probably guilty of nothing more than being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I'm sure some of the prisoners are guilty of revolutionary thinking and not going along with the crowd, but most probably aren't. Most are probably just normal people stuck in the wrong place at the wrong time. And the purpose of the prison system in North Korea, according to the survivor, was to cleanse 3 generations worth of these disloyal thinkers. So if a father was arrested for disloyalty, whether he did it or not is beside the point. But if a father was arrested, his whole family would go to the prison camp. His kids would go to the prison camp, and his grandparents would go to the prison camp. Hence, your 3 generations. It's unclear as to what the cleansing would be. The cleansing could be an indoctrination. So they could learn to be loyal to North Korea and the state while in the camp. And perhaps the cleansing is an ethnic cleansing. Perhaps the cleansing simply means they're going to work in this prison camp until they die. Probably it's the latter of the two possibilities. Most people don't come out of a North Korean gulag they die working in the gulag. So probably the cleansing is a physical cleansing. You're going to work here till you die, and we will be rid of that generation of disloyal North Korean citizens. A lot going on in this source. I'm sorry to spring it to you on Tuesday morning like this after your weekend, but it made the most sense to go with this one today. In terms of our links, I see rule of law. I see a government obviously that is acting above the rule of law. We can be rest assured that anyone being sentenced to a North Korean gulag was not given a fair trial. They were put in there by a government acting above the rule of law. And when you don't have rule of law, a lot of people lose basic rights and freedoms. In this case, the bottom caste of North Koreans, a third of their population, according to Songbun, are without rights and freedoms because of a government that has put itself above the rule of law. You might put in self-interest too, in that this is what the North Korean government is doing in its own self-interest. This is how the North Korean government stays in power. Um, it uses fear-mongering tactics. It indoctrinates people. It scapegoats people to keep its clutch, its hold on power. That doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon. Finally, your perspective. Well, I mean, if anything, I would think that the writer is trying to push liberalism, is trying to push democracy, because of course, with democracy in place, with rule of law in place, rights and freedoms should be guaranteed. So even though it's not overt, I see an embracement. I see an advocation for liberalism and democracy that should prevent this from happening.